Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the Dark Oak. In today's episode, we discuss the story of Hannah Upp. Hannah is currently listed as a missing person, but strangely and astonishingly, this is the third time she has been reported as a missing person. We'll discuss all the details.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month through our charity, called the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of our proceeds from our Patreon and sponsorships directly to a nonprofit related to the first episode of the month. To find out more, stick around to the end of this episode, check out our Instagram, The Dark Oak Podcast, or go to our website, thedarkoak.com. Well, hey, Stephanie.
I don't know if anyone just saw our social media post, but we are currently recording in a room with newborn foster kittens.
Newborn kittens. Oh my gosh. Nothing cuter.
What I love about all of it is, we've talked about this on the podcast. You've got a lot going on in your family. And in your abundance of stress, you said, I'm going to foster this pregnant kitten.
Well, the thing is, everybody in my life has been like, what? With everything going on, you're going to take in a foster or a pregnant cat?
And I say kitten, I mean, she's little, like she's young too.
Yeah, she's probably less than a year old. She is.
To use the phrase, it's babies having babies.
Having 5 babies.
5 babies.
But this brings me joy. And I know you get that, Stephanie, where yes, your animals are work, but it is rewarding. So I have to say, newborn kittens. It's work, but it's so rewarding. They're so cute.
They are so sweet. So we may have to jump off here for just a break or 17 to snuggle a kitten.
Cuddle some kittens.
Cuddle some kittens.
Our Dark Oak kittens, our new mascot.
Yeah, exactly. May we always have new kittens.
Always. That's the best part of fostering is you love them, you take care of them, and then you give them back to the rescue who finds them amazing homes. And then you get new kittens. You get to do it over and over again. Always kittens, never cats.
Always kittens, never cats. I don't know if that's the selling point you should give to the adopters because they're going to notice something after a while.
These are the size of mice right now. And in 8 weeks, they're going to be little cats.
Little mini cats.
Yeah. So love my fosters. Well, Stephanie, before you get into today's episode, I wanted to address a comment from one of our listeners, Tracy, on Spotify.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. And they had listened to Stephanie's episode on Logan Schindelman. And in the beginning of that episode, Stephanie and I are talking about how I would really struggle if I had to describe a person to a sketch artist.
Yeah, it all came out of that like very weird sketch of the person that was seen with Logan on the day of his disappearance. And we started talking about how we would do with a sketch artist. And you fully admitted you cannot visualize faces.
I wouldn't be able to describe someone, to someone else. And so Tracy said, hey, have you ever looked into aphantasia? Apparently Tracy has aphantasia and thought that might be something that I was dealing with. So I looked it up. Aphantasia is the inability to voluntarily generate visual mental imagery, or it's a blindness of the mind's eye. And there is a test you can take, an aphantasia test. And it tells you to visualize an apple. So I did. I visualized an apple. I saw this apple in my head. And in my mind, it looked exactly like an apple. And then you compare your visualization to all these different drawings. Was your picture of this apple, was it just like a loose form? Was it cartoony? Was it photorealistic? And I thought mine was photorealistic. Then I went into my kitchen and looked at a real apple, the one I thought I was visualizing, and it was red. And
is that about where the similarities ended?
it kind of was, because I was visualizing like this deep red apple with black variations on the skin. And then I go look at an actual apple and it is red, but the variations are actually yellow and green. And I had the details
What are you
all
visualizing?
wrong.
Like a rotten apple? That's so funny.
Well, it's not like a solid color red. There's variations in
Sure.
the skin. And to me, in my mind, they were like dark variations.
So funny.
But in reality, at least this particular apple was like yellow and green.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, well, I was close on the apple, but the details were wrong. So I thought, all right, Cynthia, visualize Stephanie's face right now. And Stephanie, I could not visualize you. And then I was like, okay, what color hair does Stephanie have? Okay, Stephanie has brown hair. It's long. What color eyes does she have? I think they might be brown. Are they big? Are they little? I have no idea. Does she have thin lips? Does she have big lips? I have no idea. I did the same thing with my husband, Andy. What do Andy's lips look like? I don't know. I cannot visualize them.
That's fascinating.
I think I may have this.
I think you do. Tracy, you have diagnosed Cynthia from across the airwaves, and I'm so grateful to you.
Here's the thing. I'm really grateful because we even joked about it. You were like, Cynthia, come on. You do true crime. You know how important these details are. If you were to witness something, like you've got to be able to
to help
describe. Yeah. We joked about it, but part of me was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Why can't I even tell you what color a car was that just went by me? And I feel so much better about it. Like maybe I really can't. So it's not a disorder. It's not a disease. It's not anything like that. It's just different brains work differently. And so I think I might have maybe a mild form of it. Because I can, if you tell me to like picture a rainbow right now, I can see a rainbow. My mind doesn't just create cartoons. To me, it looks real. But does it look like an actual rainbow? Probably not.
Well, this is what I was saying. You thought you saw an apple too, and it wasn't really a realistic apple. So I wonder what your rainbow looks like.
Probably not red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. Like it's some variation. So anyway, thank you, Tracy. I thought that was so fascinating and so interesting. And I think I actually really learned something about myself. Yeah, that might prove helpful. I don't have to beat myself up that I don't know what color Stephanie's eyes are, and they are brown.
I'm going to make flashcards so you know what I look like in case I go missing.
Well, and that's the part that seems weird because when you say, oh, you can't visualize someone, obviously I know what you look like. Like I don't see you and be like, and not recognize you. I just can't create you from scratch. Can you picture me if I'm not here?
Yeah.
Really? You can just see my face easily?
Yes. Even like your little freckles and things?
No.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I know where they all are.
Wow. No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Same for my husband. He has a lot of freckles. I know where the bigger ones are. I know my middle son, I know his freckle pattern on his cheeks.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
I think I get too detailed.
Well, I mean, that's pretty detailed. But maybe that's how the average mind works.
Maybe. I don't know.
Fascinating.
I mean, I can't say I would notice everyone like that, but people I spend a lot of time with, yeah. Like I study them.
Wow.
Like their little mannerisms and yeah, again, like little freckles and moles and eyebrows and things. Like I generally notice.
I need to get these brows taken care. I'm gonna have to start wearing makeup. I had no idea, Stephanie. She knows my scars.
I'm basically a magnifying mirror.
Lovely. Every wrinkle, Cynthia, every imperfection.
But I study them. And again, it's people I'm close to because it's people that I love. It's like I love that person's little wrinkles or I love their freckles or you know what I mean? Right. It's like someone I love. So it's like an endearment thing.
Sure.
But like I want to know them. Like I want to know what they look like, their skin, you know?
Right. No, I get it.
So it's not a critical thing.
Right.
I notice things.
I love it.
So there we go. We're on polar opposites.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Fun.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to talk about some Hannah Upp? Because I know this has been one I've been working on for a little while. And every time I bring it up, all you say is, that is wild.
That is wild. And I have not let you tell me anything about it. So it's all fresh. I don't recognize her name. I don't think I've ever heard anything about this case. But just from your little teaser, I'm like, okay, something bizarre is about to unfold.
Well, and her case is really about dissociative fugue. We reference it in different cases where people go missing, but we don't go into a tremendous amount of detail. And so this one kind of helps us focus on it. And so if we do talk about it in later episodes, this is one we can always reference back to.
Okay.
Like if you have more questions about dissociative fugue, this is the episode for you.
Which I do. How interesting.
Which I also do.
Yes.
Well, the overview of Hannah Upp's case is that on Thursday, September 14th, 2017, 32-year-old Hannah was seen leaving her apartment. The very next day, Hannah was reported as a missing person. But as I said before, the thing that makes Hannah's case even more baffling is that this was the third time that Hannah seemed to vanish into thin air, because Hannah suffered from this rare condition called dissociative fugue. And dissociative fugue is a temporary form of amnesia that causes someone to completely forget their identity. It's also known as the Jason Bourne syndrome. Are you familiar with those movies?
No, I've never seen them, but
Really?
yeah, I need to.
Oh, the premise of the Jason Bourne movies, all the Bourne identity, Bourne supremacy, is that he is awoken as an adult, doesn't know who he is, doesn't know his past, doesn't know why he is where he is, but he has these incredible skills, like an assassin, essentially, like a spy. He knows how to decode things. He knows how to use weapons he's never, or at least he thinks he's never seen before. He knows his way around buildings he should not know his way around. He knows martial arts that he should not know. It's this incredible wealth of knowledge. And basically what he finds out is he was this United States secret agent, and something has happened to him. His memory was wiped. And now he has to basically find the bad guys that have created him, if you will.
Okay.
But again, that dissociative fugue. So you were a whole person. You lived a whole life. You had a whole personality, and something triggers in your mind, and your mind forgets who you are. You don't forget how to walk, how to eat, how to take care of yourself, but the parts that make you you are no longer there.
Which is so wild, because that's, like you said, the parts that make you you, like that. So really, it's not like you.
Yeah, so it's not like a stroke where you need therapy to
you lose function.
You lose function.
You just lose your soul.
Well,
personality?
I mean, that seems, your personality. Again,
the
all
most
of your
important
memories.
Part.
The most important part. I mean, because I'm not going to call you a shell of a person, because you're still in there. That person you were is still in there. And most of the time, this dissociative fugue fades. It can last anywhere from a few days, and it can last as much of a few years, but that's not as common. And all the memories can come back, and you remember who you are again. But for a period of time, you don't know who you are. But it's not easy to spot someone that's in this dissociative state, because they're not acting unusual. They're acting like someone just going about their day. They just have no idea who they are.
That's wild.
According to Medical News Today, dissociative fugue occurs suddenly and is often accompanied by traveling or wandering. Individuals suffering from dissociative fugue often journey or drift to a new location without any recollection of how they got there. They may even assume a new identity or adopt a different lifestyle to cope with their confusion.
Well, that makes sense, because if you don't know who you are, you don't know where you live, you don't know where you belong.
Exactly. All the things. The exact cause of dissociative fugue is unknown, but is believed to be related to severe stress, trauma, or mental illness, and could be triggered by events such as war, natural disasters, abuse, internal conflict, or the loss of a loved one. Hannah Emily Upp grew up with her parents and brother Dan in a small town in Oregon. Her parents were ministers, and their family was involved in a Japanese American church. Hannah's mother, while American, was fluent in Japanese and very involved in the church and the community. Hannah grew up with strict religious values and would often accompany her parents on mission trips. Family and friends described Hannah as fun and energetic. In fact, some friends said it was difficult to keep up with her because she had such high energy. I mean, she was just on the go. She was the it girl.
Oh, I wish I had that. And is her father Japanese? So she half
No.
Japanese? No.
No.
She just attended a Japanese American church.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And everyone that has known her said she was full of positivity, joy, and was overall just a great person to be around. Now, when Hannah was 15, it became clear that her parents were growing apart. And this was mostly because of divide in their religious beliefs. Remember, they're both ministers. Hannah's mother was more open minded to different religions and walks of life, while her father was a bit more rigid and a bit more of a fundamentalist. After the divorce, Hannah's father went overseas to various countries to minister, and Hannah, along with her mother and brother, moved to a small Quaker community outside of Philadelphia. Hannah struggled during this time in her life. She always considered herself to be a daddy's girl, and her parents' split was difficult not only because of the physical distance between the two of them, but also the religious divide, because she felt like because she was with her mom, she was more open-minded. And Quakerism in general, I'm going to go into it a little bit more, but it is open to individual spiritual encounters. So it's less rigid. And, by fundamentalist, I mean, there's a lot more living by the law, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I'm describing that correctly, I think. I'm not going to say they were living a more liberal lifestyle, but I think her father would have said that.
Sure.
Now, because Quakerism was such an important part of Hannah's life, I did pull out a few details about Quakerism that I find interesting because I was familiar with Quakers, the name, but I can't say I knew a lot about their religious practices or beliefs.
Me neither. In fact, when you describe them as a little bit more liberal, if that's not the right word, but open, I guess.
Yeah.
That's surprising to me because I would have assumed, just based on the little bit I know, that they were a more conservative religion.
And they definitely are. I mean, there are definitely, rules and guidelines within the religion, but it's interesting because it's really more of an individualistic experience.
Okay.
First, I thought this was super interesting. Fellow Quakers refer to themselves as friends. This was taken from the Bible verse, John 15:14, that reads, quote, "Ye are my friends, if ye do whatsoever I command you," end quote.
That's sweet.
The Quakers are historically Protestant, and they are traditionally open to what I would call, again, these individual spiritual experiences. They mostly reject the practice of ordination for ministers, opting instead for equality among the members and opportunities for everyone to serve. Most friends believe in continuing revelation, that God continuously reveals truth directly to individuals. Friends often focus on trying to feel the presence of God. Some experience their concept of God using phrases such as the inner light, inward light of Christ, or the Holy Spirit. This also leads to their practice of silent worship, whereby gatherings are operated in silence until someone feels led to speak.
Okay.
Now, Hannah would go to college at Bryn Mawr, which at the time was an all-women's liberal arts college just outside of Philadelphia. Side note, it was also founded by the Quakers.
Okay.
Now, at the time she attended, it didn't have any religious affiliation, but it was a Quakers women's college. So cool, right?
That's very interesting. Yeah.
During her time in college, Hannah's family noticed that she was struggling with her identity, and it seemed to come out when she was discussing her religious views or just the trend in society in general. Then, in her junior year, Hannah revealed to her family and close friends that she was dating a woman.
And I assume that is not approved of in her father nor her mother's religious beliefs.
I think it was definitely more condemned on her father's side. Her father had the most apprehension to it.
Okay.
Now, her father was teaching at a seminary in India at the time. However, Hannah continued to visit him regularly, even though he did not approve of this lifestyle. And it seemed that while they may not have agreed on this particular point, they maintained a good relationship.
Well, that's good, I think. He still loved his daughter.
Right.
And he still showed her love and,
Right.
and was kind to her.
Right. So we don't exactly know everything that happened when she visited him. She visited him pretty much every summer. All we have is his thoughts on how the relationship was going, but he felt that they maintained a nice, solid relationship.
Okay.
In the summer of 2008, Hannah found herself living in Harlem, New York. She had secured a roommate and was thoroughly enjoying the city. She loved the freedom to jump into social issues, and she was particularly involved with the Freegans movement, which helps to coordinate ways to reduce usage or waste of resources like restaurant or grocery waste. The Freegans.
I've never heard of that, but it sounds like a good thing.
I think so too, for the most part. I mean, at least in concept.
Yeah, just in general.
Yeah.
We produce a lot of waste, so anything we can do to mitigate that.
I heard a statistic the other day that said 40% of food that is produced goes to waste in the United States.
I believe that because I really, really try. Even me, like I'll make a grocery list, I'll make a menu, and then I end up throwing away so much food. It's terrible.
I know. I hate it. Luckily, we have chickens and pigs. I don't know. Maybe that kind of helps a little bit because I rarely just throw away food. So that's helped me a little bit. But at the same time, we bought it for human consumption. So.
But that would make me feel better that at least because I feel bad on two different levels. I feel bad that I'm wasting food when there's people starving. And I feel bad, especially if it's an animal product.
Right.
Because just for the moral reasons that here, this animal was killed and then for nothing.
Right. Now, 23-year-old Hannah was in town preparing to begin her career at Thurgood Marshall Middle School in Harlem, New York as a middle school teacher. On August 27th, the day before school was scheduled to start, Hannah put on red shorts and a black sports bra and headed out for a run. But Hannah didn't return. Her roommate noted that her belongings were all left behind, including her purse, wallet, passport, and cell phone. Red flag.
Is it if you're going for a run?
But she didn't come back from the run.
Okay, yes.
I think if you come back in an hour or two, sure, but you don't return at all, I think that's an indication that there wasn't a change of plans and she decided to go somewhere else.
Okay, sure.
Hannah was listed as a missing person and everyone began looking for her. I'm talking about law enforcement, but also her friends and family. In addition, her face was plastered all over local newspapers and on thousands of missing person posters in New York City. Finally, almost 2 weeks later, Hannah was seen on surveillance footage at an Apple store in Midtown Manhattan. But think about that for a minute. 2 weeks completely missing. And she just shows up on surveillance footage at an Apple store.
I mean, there's some relief there. Okay, she's alive. But at the same time, like, how bizarre.
How bizarre.
She's been in the city. She's not been taken, thankfully. And she's not dead, thankfully. But where's she been?
All the questions.
Weird.
Incredibly, someone at the Apple store recognized Hannah and asked her if she was the missing teacher.
Oh.
She denied that she was and quickly brushed him off, saying that she was fine. She wasn't the missing teacher. She didn't need any help. She was totally fine. And all of this is caught on video footage.
And it's definitely her.
It's definitely her. Yeah, when her family was shown the film, they knew right away that it was Hannah. And they also noticed this odd detail. Hannah was still wearing the same sports bra and running shorts she was wearing the day she disappeared.
Okay, I was going to ask, what was she wearing?
Exact same outfit.
Wow, for 2 weeks, she hasn't changed. Now, here is something that, and maybe you'll get into it. If you have this dissociative fugue and you see a poster of yourself saying missing, like, would you recognize it? Like the fact that this Apple employee asked her, "Are you the missing teacher?"
No, she didn't recognize herself. And remember, we talked about this. It was a Patreon case, but remember we talked about this in the Agatha Christie case?
I do.
Where she was reading newspapers that had her picture and her story in it. Now, there is some thought about whether she actually had dissociative fugue. I lean towards the fact that she probably did because of that trauma she suffered, losing her mother and then the divorce and the whole 9 yards. But remember, like, she saw pictures of herself and did not know it was her.
Right. And see, I leaned kind of.
You think she made that up for the
dramatic,
stories? Yeah.
Is where I leaned on that episode.
But if she did have it, it would make sense that she didn't recognize herself.
Okay.
And in the same situation here, Hannah did not recognize herself.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, all they had was the footage that was turned in. Hannah had already left the store before this footage was turned in, before people really realized, oh, wait, it actually is her.
Did she purchase anything?
No, she came in And she was looking around. Apparently, she kind of tinkered around with one of the computers, like one of the laptops, but then just walked out.
Because presumably she has no money, no cell phone, no nothing. So she would have even been able to. Where? Oh gosh, I have so many questions. 2 weeks in New York City. I guess that could be a place where you could find a stoop to sit on and maybe find like some food. And New York City might be a good place if you don't have money or a cell phone. But still,
police do have some theories about what she was doing during those 2 weeks, but there still are a lot of question marks.
Yeah, I have questions.
Now, 2 days later, Hannah was spotted at a Starbucks in Soho, but she left the coffee shop via a back exit before the police could arrive. Now, a back exit. Isn't that curious?
That's very interesting.
Hannah was also seen going into a public library where she accessed her Gmail account on one of the public computers. Reports confirmed that the account was accessed, but no emails were sent out.
So you would remember your email address, but you wouldn't remember your name? That's where the line gets fuzzy.
I agree. And there are some people that think maybe she was faking it. But there have been therapists that have said, yeah, because it's kind of rote memory.
Yeah, like muscle memory almost.
Muscle memory to log in. But it is strange.
I get that. I get the whole like muscle memory because, I'll unlock my phone.
Yep.
Don't even look. I just know my code. But if I unlock my phone and it says, hello, Cynthia, wouldn't that be... so many questions. Many questions already.
If you think she's just trying to avoid her friends and family or start over, why on earth would you stay in the city and go to these very public places? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like if you really are in some ways faking this dissociative fugue, wouldn't you go not somewhere like this? I mean, somebody has recognized you.
True. If I were faking this, I would have previously taken a bunch of cash out. I would have had a bag. I would have
skipped town. Bare minimum changed your clothes.
Right. It's just wild to me that you're going to remember your email address and log on and see emails to and from yourself and not know who you are.
Well, it's like Jason Bourne. He knew how to do karate and how to kill somebody with a pencil.
Now, are you aware you don't know are you aware there's a problem?
No, I don't think so. I think your brain, again, as I said, I think your brain adopts this other identity. Like she just made up who she was. Because I think your brain, it can't compute that you're no one, if that makes sense. But we've never heard from Hannah what she thought was happening.
Wow, what a fascinating disorder. Is it a disorder?
Yeah, and terrifying.
Terrifying, but they don't know enough to know they should be terrified. If they don't even know that they don't know who they are. If I just suddenly wake up tomorrow and I'm, Marilyn Monroe.
I think more terror, like horrible for your family.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yes. For of course. Yes. For the people who love you. But like, if I just can wake up tomorrow and I'm the Queen of England, I mean, I'm living my best life.
I mean, it's almost kind of like in many ways, not to make light in any way, but people with Alzheimer's, they're kind of in their own world. It's very hard for loved ones caring for someone with Alzheimer's. And yes, there is some fear and anxiety that comes with Alzheimer's in the patient themselves, but ultimately they're living in their own world.
True. And often don't realize there's anything necessarily wrong. So,
exactly.
Okay, that does actually help me clarify a little bit because I was struggling.
In an Alzheimer's patient, normally the time that you see fear and anxiety is when someone is trying to tell them the real reality,
sure.
Like the actual reality. If they're in their own world, they're talking to their deceased sisters. They need to get home to see their, long deceased mother.
Just go with it.
Yeah.
Agree with them. Whatever they say is right.
Just go with it because they're very content in the world they're living in right now.
Right. Okay. That does help me kind of understand this better.
A little. I don't know that I've even got my head wrapped around this whole thing. So, but there are clearly questions. Predominantly, where is she staying and what is she eating?
Right. But even that, I'm like, okay, New York City, there's going to be pizza thrown away in trash can. Well,
in some of that, I do wonder if her being part of the Freegans if she knew where there would be food distribution centers.
True. Or even like dumpsters. She would probably be aware of how restaurants and grocery stores dispose of their food and maybe like know which dumpsters to get
Yeah,
into.
and I will tell you, we don't have specific answers to this, but in my mind, that's where I go.
I think in a place like New York City, food would be probably the least of your concern.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Then on September 16th, 3 weeks after Hannah walked out of her door, the captain of a Staten Island ferry saw something floating in the water. His heart sank as he drew closer, realizing that what he saw was the outline of a woman.
Oh.
Captain Christopher Covella told the Daily News, quote, "I saw what appeared to be a head. I called for a rescue boat right away and got as close as possible to her," end quote. The crew worked to pull her out of the water as quickly as possible. They originally thought she was deceased, but then she gasped for air. Captain Covella continued, quote, "She was face down unconscious. When we grabbed her, she was shaking and cold. I didn't know how long she had been in the water," end quote.
Well, it sounds like they got her just in time.
Just in time. She was transported to the hospital where she was able to tell doctors who she was and gave them her mother's name and phone number. Her mother showed up and sat by her side while doctors and authorities questioned her. Hannah was still wearing the red running shorts and the black sports bra she had been wearing 3 weeks earlier. When she was found, she was wearing no shoes, jewelry, or identification.
I wonder if like the shock from like the cold water and literally almost drowning and
I think you're onto
somehow,
something.
like, woke her, brought her out of it.
That's a common theory. I think you're onto something. That's what therapists have said, that it stunned her out of the fugue.
This is insane. This is insane.
Now, incredibly, Hannah had no memory of the last few weeks.
No.
Or even that very day. She just was like, I'm on this boat. Where is my mom?
I mean, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. In fact, Hannah made comments about how she needed to be discharged so she could get her classroom set up and ready for the start of school, unaware that school had started weeks ago. Because remember, she disappeared the day before school started.
I mean, it does make sense. It's kind of like you live in these two different worlds.
Yeah. Police were able to interview eyewitnesses who said they saw Hannah diving into the water from a nearby pier in what they interpreted to be a suicide attempt. But Hannah, again, said she had no idea how she wound up in the water.
With no shoes, no
jewelry, no identification.
Nothing.
And again, we knew she didn't have identification, but again, still in that same outfit. Using security footage, police were able to piece together some of Hannah's movements over the past weeks. They said that for 8 days in a row, Hannah took showers at different New York sports clubs around the city. I find this so interesting. Each time she told workers that she had misplaced her ID and they would just let her in. Curiously, though, Hannah never went to the same club twice. Like, I would think you would go to the same one over and over, and some people have said it's suspicious that she didn't go to the same one twice. Like, was she trying not to be identified? Or maybe it was just coincidence?
Like she had the wherewithal to not go to the same one twice.
Or maybe, again, it was just coincidence. I don't know. She was just wandering around and was like, oh, here's a sports club. I'll go in this one. But I do find it's interesting that she would go to all different ones.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that could mean, that she's like knowingly trying to avoid being identified.
But then if that's the case, why are you going into a public library and an Apple store and a Starbucks?
Right. But I can also see her indicating that she just, like you said, just walked by and was like, oh, here's a place I can go take a shower.
Yeah. So that's how she stayed clean. But then again, put back on the clothes she already had. Is it strange?
Maybe she washed them in the shower. I have seen like in movies where someone's, without a home or traveling or something like that, they'll like take their clothes and wash them in the shower.
Sure.
That's what I would do if I had to wear the same dirty clothes. I would be.
Yeah. No one has ever said anything to that effect. So
maybe that's even what she was doing in the water.
Maybe.
I mean, I guess if you had access to showers, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah. And again, so these eyewitnesses, they had actually called into the sheriff's station when they saw her jump off because they said, oh my gosh, somebody's committing suicide. And while police were responding to those eyewitnesses, that was when the ferry captain saw her in the water, so they put two and two together.
Okay.
But these eyewitnesses, they felt it was scary enough that they called police officers because she just jumped off this pier. Hannah was treated for dehydration, severe sunburn, and hypothermia. She was then transferred to a psychiatric ward where after some time she was diagnosed with a sudden and temporary form of amnesia known as dissociative fugue. Because a dissociative fugue can be brought on by trauma, Hannah underwent hypnosis to see if she could recall any trauma or traumatic thing happening to her on the day of her disappearance. Somebody thought maybe she was running and she got mugged, or she saw something happen that triggered the dissociative fugue. But Hannah remembered nothing out of the ordinary. She was just running, and then she woke up being pulled out of the water. Hannah's case made the local news, and the response was mixed, kind of what we're saying. Many people accused her of staging the whole thing because there are some curious details. You were able to log into your email, you didn't go to the same club twice, but at the same time, she wasn't really trying not to be found either, in my opinion.
So far, just from the bit you've told me, I would say this seems legit.
I think so, especially knowing what we know happens later, in Hannah's life. But yeah, it's odd. But I can see how the average reader of a newspaper would say, I don't know if I'm buying this.
Well, because it's such a bizarre thing that could happen. Like, it seems unbelievable. Like, I could just wake up tomorrow and not know who I am.
Yep.
And not even know that I don't know who that I am. That's just seems like something that doesn't really happen.
Totally.
It happens in movies, like Born Identity.
Yes, exactly. Friends and family reported, though, that Hannah was mortified and embarrassed. In a social media post to her supporters, Hannah wrote, quote, "As is typical of a case of dissociative fugue, I was not aware of my own identity, and I emerged from the episode with essentially no memory of what happened during the time I was missing," end quote. In an interview with the New York Times, Hannah said, quote, "I went from going for a run to being in the ambulance. It was like 10 minutes had passed, but it was almost 3 weeks. It's weird. How do you feel guilty for something you didn't even know you did? It's not your fault, but it's still somehow you. So it's definitely made me reconsider everything. Who was I before? Who was I then? Is that part of me? And who am I now?" End quote.
It makes a lot of sense because I think if I woke up and learned that I'd forgotten who my family was, who my kids were, who my mom was for 3 weeks, wouldn't you kind of feel like a bad daughter, a bad mom, a bad friend?
And to know everybody was searching for you and the whole city.
You're just walking around in a sports bra and shorts for 3 weeks, eating trash out of a trash can.
Right.
That's not just something you're just like, oh, well, like that's
no,
kind
disconcerting.
of a big deal.
And I think feeling the emotions like embarrassment, like her friends and family reported, I think I would feel that.
Oh, I think I would as well.
Right. Now, Hannah continued to see a therapist for a while, but ultimately felt it wasn't helping her. She felt like doctors were trying to make her some kind of poster child for dissociative fugue instead of really understanding what happened to her. Like she became more of the disorder than a person.
Which again points back to this having really happened and not her not faking. Because if you were faking, you'd probably love the attention.
I think so too. I think she just wanted to put it all behind her.
Right. Just let me figure out what happened.
Yeah.
Let me learn about myself.
Yeah.
But let's move on.
Right. Hannah eventually moved to Kensington, Maryland, where she took a job as a Spanish teacher at a Montessori school. It was there in 2012, 4 years after the first incident, that it happened again. On the first day of school, Hannah disappeared. Isn't that weird?
Okay. Did she have trauma from her first day of school as a child or something having to do with teaching?
I don't know. Weird, right?
Like
and
maybe
how did
really
she
bad
go?
nerves?
But think about it, 4 years after. So she had first days of school where nothing happened. So why were these different?
Yeah, but this was a new place.
So it was 4 years after her first incident. So she had moved to Maryland, and I think she had taught there for 1 or 2 years without incident before this happened. This time, though, she was found only 2 days later. Hannah awoke to find herself in a dirty creek about 1.5 miles from her school. She had no memory of how she got there or what happened during those 2 days.
She appears to be drawn to water when
Yes.
she's in these states.
This is a theme. This is a theme. And certainly I can see how the water would wake you up, but I'm almost wondering, is this like some primeval yearn to go to the water, to drink the water? Like, I don't know.
Well, that was my thought. Like maybe she's thirsty, so she's going to get water.
Right.
Or that's the only thing I can think of. But that's what, oh my gosh, it's just wild. The first day of school and then found in water again.
Yep. Now, she was determined to try to make a fresh start. So in 2013, Hannah moved to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, where she once again took a job at a Montessori school. And again, for another 4 years, she seemed to thrive while working and living on the island. Michael Bourne, head of the Virgin Island Montessori School where Hannah worked, said, quote, "Whenever we do a tour for a new family, the first classroom visit is to Hannah Upp's. She's one heck of an example. She's not just a Montessori teacher, she's a passionate Montessori teacher," end quote.
Were both episodes 4 years apart?
Yeah, we have 3 episodes. We're coming up on the 3rd one, and they were 4 years apart.
So maybe the link, maybe it has nothing to do with starting school. Maybe there's something that happens every 4 years.
It's possible. Anything is possible
Oh
in
my
this case,
gosh.
Cynthia. We don't know.
I'm going to like go down a rabbit hole with this.
This one, when I heard it the first time, immediately it caught my attention. I have been following this case. There aren't a ton of developments, but I find this dissociative fugue just fascinating.
Oh, yeah. What is it? Is it the every 4 years? Is it the event, the water, like all of it?
Yep. Now, Hannah truly was thriving while she was in St. Thomas. She had many friends. She was very sociable. She loved the beach. She loved the water. She was a very strong swimmer, and she enjoyed all of the water activities, especially snorkeling.
So she likes water just in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And especially at St. Thomas, she just loved being close to the beach, loved heading out there. She had her favorite beach that she could be found at on her days off. So this was just a regular way of life for her to be snorkeling in the water. And then we also have this kind of strange affiliation with her coming out of her fugues in the water as well.
Okay.
Then in September of 2017, Hurricane Irma threatened to change everything. And I see your face right now because you remember Hurricane Irma. We here in Florida had our own run-in with Irma, and it was pretty brutal for us as well.
It was pretty bad. Yeah. One of the top 3 of our lifetime?
Absolutely. Hurricane Irma was an extremely powerful and devastating Category 5 hurricane. And for anybody who is not familiar with hurricanes, they range from a Category 1 to 5, and 5 is the strongest, most powerful, sustained winds. And this is when it can truly just devastate any landmass, but particularly an island that really has nothing to block those powerful, powerful winds. And at the time Hurricane Irma hit St. Thomas, it was considered the most powerful hurricane on record in the open Atlantic region. At landfall, it was the 3rd strongest Atlantic hurricane ever recorded. Irma caused widespread and catastrophic damage, particularly in the Florida Keys and the northeastern Caribbean islands of St. Martin, Anguilla, and the Virgin Islands, where Hannah Upp was living. The hurricane caused at least 134 deaths. The devastation of Hurricane Irma was so widespread that the word Irmageddon was coined soon after the hurricane to describe the damage caused by the hurricane. So I know I'm probably going overboard in my explanation of how awful Irma was, but it's important to note that we aren't just talking about a little storm.
No, this is literally like something you see in a movie where you're just a sitting duck.
Yeah.
You can't get away from it, and it just bears down on you. Water, rain, roofs are flying off, trees are being ripped up, water's everywhere.
Flooding the whole thing. Now, luckily, we live in a modern age where we know they're coming.
Oh, thankfully.
Thankfully. So everyone's given at least a few days notice. And when you're on an island, those are precious moments, precious hours to get yourself prepared, to get yourself to a safe place. So before Irma made landfall on September 6th, most people living within the Virgin Islands had made the choice to evacuate, which is the safest option. Many tried to get Hannah to evacuate, especially because of her fugue states, because they're thinking any amount of trauma could trigger another episode. However, she refused.
Which I don't get, and no judgment, but for somebody who lives here in Florida, now we live in central Florida, so I don't think I've ever been evacuated. And I live on a hill.
I think I would if I lived on the coast.
On the coast, I would absolutely be getting out of there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I struggle with people who choose not to evacuate, but I guess to each their own, but that's risky.
Now, Hannah's activity during the few days leading up to the storm was slightly strange. Hannah went to her ex-boyfriend's house to talk to him. He wasn't home, and she learned that he was evacuating the island. So she drove to the port where he was preparing to board a cruise ship that was being used to get people off the island. She found him and just hung out with him for a few hours, just chatting it up with him. And he would, of course, say, "Hey, Hannah, you're already here. Why don't you jump on this boat with me?" And she just said, "Nah, I'm good. I'm good. Just going to hang out here." I think that's very strange.
It is. Now, I would wonder, I'm assuming they remained friends and were still in contact with each other, so.
But it does seem, the day before, like, a huge storm's going to hit, you're just.
Even here. Like
you be preparing.
We are doing we're boarding windows. We're doing all kinds of stuff.
Picking up anything in the yard, anything that could be a flying projectile.
The day before a storm is never relaxing. Just hanging out.
Like waiting for a boat
live
that
in
you're
an
not
apartment
even.
Or something?
She did live in an apartment. So there wasn't as much of that. But also, I think maybe you'd want to go help your friends or something. I don't know. It just seems it seems odd to me, and maybe it's not. Maybe I'm making something out of nothing, but I find this to be a little strange.
It's very relaxed for the day before a big storm, a huge record-breaking storm on an island. And I would assume that most of the island did evacuate.
Yes.
She's very relaxed.
She's very relaxed. Right, exactly. Now, the following day, Hurricane Irma hit the island mercilessly. Wind gusts up to 137 miles per hour did tremendous damage. While the island was all but destroyed, Hannah did make it through the storm, hunkering down with her roommates in the laundry room of their apartment building. In the end, the storm devastated the island and claimed the lives of at least 52 people within the Virgin Islands.
Wow.
While emergency services scrambled to make sense of the chaos, they were handed another heavy blow. Another Category 5 storm, Hurricane Maria, was on the way and due to make landfall within days. And you're shaking your head because, I remember that too.
It was like a scary movie.
Yep. On September 14th, a week after Hurricane Irma swept through the Caribbean, and 1 week before Hurricane Maria made landfall, Hannah left her apartment to go for a morning swim at a nearby beach. According to a note she left for her friend, she planned to go for a swim and then go to the Virgin Island Montessori school where she worked as a teacher. From her note, it seemed as if she'd be home before the curfew the government had imposed in wake of the storms. But Hannah never came home. One of Hannah's best friends, Maggie Guzman, started calling all of Hannah's closest friends in both St. Thomas and back in the States to see if they'd heard from her, but no one had. The next morning, a construction crew found Hannah's clothes and car keys by Sapphire Beach, which was one of Hannah's favorite beaches. The search for Hannah began and took place both on land and in water, but the search efforts were slow because many of Hannah's friends had evacuated St. Thomas. In addition, the island was still reeling from Hurricane Irma and preparing for Hurricane Maria. I mean, just chaos, right?
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised they're out even looking for her, quite frankly.
Right. 2 days later, a friend found Hannah's car parked in the Sapphire Beach parking lot. Inside the car was Hannah's cell phone, wallet, and passport.
again, she left everything behind.
Yeah. Now, it was during this time that Maggie Guzman made contact with Jake Bradley. And he was a U.S. military veteran and trained emergency technician that was based on the island. Jake was organizing search parties for missing people in the storm's wake. To facilitate communication, Jake started a Facebook page for people in need of help. In an interview with the U.S. Sun, Jake said, quote, "Nobody had cell service or Wi-Fi. A lot of them were just hunkered down in their houses. So even though they were okay, their families stateside couldn't get a hold of them, and they were blasting all over Facebook thinking they were dead or missing. We took care of the most in need first, like diabetics and dialysis patients. We started making our way through the list, checking them off as we went. We'd use the Facebook page to say, hey, this person has been found and they're okay," end quote. So ultimately, he was helping people find their loved ones. So they would write into him. He would drive over to that house and then come back and say, yes, they're here. They're safe. They just can't contact you yet. Which, I mean, talk about the work of the angels.
So I've been in similar situations before. My husband's law enforcement. He works on the coast. And there have been times in these types of storms where literally the police phone lines are just so overrun. And I have literally been seeing messages on Facebook. And I'm like, this address, there's a woman with a baby. The house is flooding.
Yep.
Like, and literally my husband and I are working together to get teams on the ground helping these people. This also kind of reminds me of Sneha Phillips.
Yes.
Because she went missing right after 9/11.
Listen, you never want to go missing, but you definitely don't want to go missing in a disaster.
No, because here we have Hannah and she's kind of getting lost because so many others are missing in the storm.
Yep.
And then the chaos all around, that just, wow.
And as a matter of fact, this is a little premature in the case to say it, but it makes sense to plug it in here. There was at some point a little pushback from some of the residents on St. Thomas about the search for Hannah because they felt, why are we searching for this American so much where some of our own people are still missing and you're not putting resources into those? And I get it. I understand. So there was a little pushback there too.
Yeah, emotions are high. You're desperate. And if it's not your loved one that's getting the attention, then it's never going to feel like enough.
And I understand. I understand where they're coming from. Does that mean Hannah didn't deserve to be searched for? Of course not. Of course we should look for her, but we should have also have looked for other loved ones that were there too.
Right.
Now, it was through this Facebook page that Jake had set up that Maggie wound up contacting Jake and saying, hey, listen, Hannah's a missing person too. Could you help us find her? Now, her situation wasn't as clear cut because it wasn't as simple as just driving to her apartment and confirming she's okay. She truly was missing. After finding out that Hannah's belongings and car were found at Sapphire Beach, Bradley and a group of volunteers started searching by foot and by boat, scouring the shoreline and a small island nearby where a current may have swept her away if she had indeed been swimming in the water.
Yeah.
The Coast Guard sent 3 helicopters to conduct searches from above, but still no trace of Hannah could be found.
And this is a lot of resources in the middle of just disaster everywhere.
I agree. Days later, on September 19th, while Hurricane Maria battered St. Thomas, Hannah's friends and family created their own Find Hannah Up Facebook page. In a post, they explain, quote, if anyone sees Hannah, please go up to her. She has a rare dissociative amnesia disorder that may be at play. If so, she may not know where she is or who she is, end quote. After Storm Maria passed, Jake resumed the search, circling the island by boat and canvassing the airport, homeless shelters, beaches, hospitals, and even the morgue.
Sure.
He also started interviewing local captains of private boats who had run legal and illegal shuttles to Puerto Rico before Irma. None of them recognized Hannah, nor did any of the skippers aboard any of the licensed ferries or private charters. A number of potential sightings of Hannah were reported, but they too proved fruitless. Hannah's mother, who immediately flew to St. Thomas to aid in the search for her daughter, released this statement. Quote, our beloved Hannah has disappeared. We do not know what has happened, and we are hopeful that she will be found alive and well. Our thoughts and prayers are with Hannah and all those who continue to search tirelessly for her. We know our fear and uncertainty is shared by many others, and our hearts go out to all who wait. End quote. Jake told the U.S. Sun, quote, early on, I was actually pretty confident that she was in a fugue state. We were thinking she'd just seen what was probably the most traumatic event she'd ever seen in her life, and high stress was one of the indicators that could trigger her condition, end quote. Hannah's mother, Barbara, moved to St. Thomas around a month after her daughter was last seen. She spent every morning for a few years sitting at a cafe at Sapphire Beach, looking out at the ocean and waiting for her daughter to emerge from the waves.
Oh my gosh, that is heart-wrenching.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, though, she came up empty-handed in her search for Hannah, and she has now returned to the U.S. Jake texts Barbara from time to time, checking in to see how she is. In their last correspondence, he said she remained as hopeful as ever that Hannah will one day return home. It has now been over 7 years since Hannah went missing. So, let's talk theories. Jake Bradley believes that the evidence points to Hannah going into the water. And I think that makes sense, right?
Sure.
He noted that both her previous fugues involved a body of water.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the note Hannah left for her roommates, he thinks she went for a swim in a fugue state and possibly never made it out of the water.
I think that is perfectly valid theory.
Sure. Yeah. He said, quote, I definitely think she went into the water. What happened when she got in the water? That's kind of where the debate starts. But the evidence clearly shows that she got into the water, end quote. So let's just say Jake is correct. She went into the water, but maybe she also made it out. Hannah's a really strong swimmer, and she'd often go for mile-long swims. So many of the outward islands, they were searched by helicopter, but they weren't searched on foot. Can Hannah have even made it to one of the outside islands? Could she have swam that far, possibly?
I mean, I guess she could have, but this was in the aftermath of a storm, and the waters stay rough for a while.
And to that point, the ocean reportedly had 3 to 4 foot waves in that area, as well as an 8.5 knot current that would have made it hard for even like an Olympic swimmer. And 3 to 4 foot waves do not sound that big, but they are big.
Huge.
They are big.
Like I'm a water person. I would not get in the water.
No.
With those waves to swim.
No. Now, here's the deal with her being in the water and drowning, though. No body ever came. Now, based on currents at the time, her body should have washed up.
Even with the storm? Even with Maria coming in? Because doesn't that kind of like mess up the normal pattern?
Well, yes. That's where the asterisk comes into this. Traditional currents in that area should have brought Hannah's body back up. However, no one was exactly sure what was happening in the water between the two storms. So could the currents have changed? Would it have taken her body further out? It's possible, but many believe that the fact that her body didn't wash up means that she didn't succumb to the water.
For me, that's not necessarily indicative that she didn't drown, because I can think of all kinds of reasons why she wouldn't have come back. And then eventually, if you're in the water long enough, animal activity, there's not going to be anything left. So with that storm, without the storm, then I would give that more weight. But the storm.
Her family is fully convinced, because her body never came ashore, that she did not drown in the ocean.
I hope she didn't.
So that kind of left me with, is there some way that she didn't go into the water, that she might be somewhere else? And there is a small possibility. One hopeful theory is that Hannah boarded one of the, quote, mercy ships that help locals off the island. During this time, there were boats everywhere evacuating and leaving the island, and many people believe that it's possible in a fugue state she got onto one of the boats and deboarded somewhere, not knowing who she was. And if that's the case, she could literally be anywhere.
She could be. I mean, up until this point, she has had a pattern of coming out of these states. So it's been 7 years why hasn't she come out of it again?
I see that. There's also, I mean, another theory. I think it's a weak one, but there is a theory that someone could have harmed Hannah and used the storm as an opportunity to dispose of her body, which again is so, it reflects back on that Sneha Phillips case.
It does.
Did someone just get lucky, quote, lucky,
Right.
and 9/11, and because of 9/11, they were able to disguise their crime? Is this possible that someone said, well, I know a storm's coming. This is going to be a free pass, if you will?
I mean, it's possible. What about the idea that she was in one of these states and she's just wandering around the island, which is already in complete rubbish? Like it's
Right.
just already
Right.
unsafe.
Like no man's land.
Sure. And then the storm Maria comes and she's killed in the storm. I guess the theory would be that eventually they would have found her, but maybe not. I don't know.
I agree with you. I mean, if she does get swept out to sea, I can see her body never being found
Or buried under piles
rubble.
of rubbish, rubble.
Yeah.
Or just being completely disseminated, honestly. I don't know. I personally don't think she made it out of that.
Well, to go back to the idea that somebody may have hurt her, Jake Bradley did look into her social media accounts and on her phone, and he reported back saying, quote, the only thing we found was a tiny disagreement between her and another teacher. But even that exchange ended with an I love you and I'll see you tomorrow in the text messages. So this was nothing out of the ordinary. Okay.
This reminds me of when you and I maybe have a little disagreement about
which never
happens ever. But like when you're like
we're like, fine, I'll talk to you later. Hashtag I love you.
And then later, hey, so I was just going through something earlier. Everything's fine.
Sorry, I was really hangry. My kids were screaming. I don't know what's going on. Sorry. Hashtag love you.
But seriously, given that, like that, that doesn't sound like somebody who's like out to get her.
No, absolutely not. Then the last theory is, if you believe Hannah had faked these fugues from the beginning, could she have used the storms to fake her own death and start over somewhere else? The only thing that gives me any thought that this could be the case is possibly because of her lifestyle and her religious family, but it seems like she had made a peace with that. Was that even the trauma maybe of like feeling like she's not accepted? So that's the only reason why I said maybe that's a possibility. But again, everything on the island, she was sociable, she had a ton of friends, she was loving her life. So it just doesn't seem like she was struggling with her identity, in my opinion.
That seems like an extreme move to literally fake your death. I mean, things have to be pretty bad to fake your death, in my opinion,
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like she was in that place. I'm assuming nobody's ever logged onto her email again.
No.
Which, again, we know she can do that when she's in one of these states.
Yeah. Jake Bradley said the idea of her trying to start over somewhere was really unlikely. It was like the lowest on his theories. He said, quote, I feel like if there was any way she was still breathing, she would have found a way to send her mom some kind of message, end quote. He said the relationship between the two of them was just too much, that there's just no way she would have just left her mom hanging.
Unless she is in one of these states.
Unless she's in one of these states, which we know is a possibility, or at least we think it's a possibility.
Right. But this would have been unusual because it's exceptionally long.
That's right.
And she presumably hasn't come out of it.
Right.
Wow, that is wild.
While Hannah's mother remained in St. Thomas, she provided several interviews and often quoted an Emily Dickinson poem, which says, quote, not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door, end quote. Hannah Emily Upp is described as a Caucasian female. She is 5'7" tall and weighed about 120 pounds when she was last seen. Hannah has brown hair and brown eyes. She was 32 years old in 2017, and she would be 39 today. She has 3 tattoos, a triangle with a wave on the inside of her right ankle, a sunflower on her right thigh, and a Venus symbol with an extra line on the left side of her lower torso. Anyone with information on the whereabouts of Hannah Upp, please contact the Virgin Island Police Department at 340-772-5605.
Poor Hannah.
I think it would have been difficult for me to live knowing that you could jump into one of these dissociative fugues at any time. But everything I've read about Hannah, I feel like she just said, you know what? Sure, that can happen, but I'm going to live my life to the fullest regardless. She could have lived her life in fear. She could have stayed with her parents. She could have had a chaperone. She could have not had a job. You know what I'm saying? She could have just locked herself in her house saying, I'm scared of this ever happening. But she never did that. She never closed herself off from living life and having experiences and making relationships. And I really applaud her for that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, moving to the Virgin Islands, just living this dream life, that takes guts for anybody.
Yep.
And especially if you know that you may wake up tomorrow and be a different person.
I mean, it could have been this looming nightmare.
Sure.
But she didn't make her whole life about it. And it
maybe,
didn't circle around this predisposition that she has for these fugue states.
Right. And maybe that's why. You know, at any given point, things can change. So
Yep.
I'm going to love every minute. And I hope she did. I hope she's still out there.
I hope she is. The Virgin Islands and just the islands in general, in some ways, are inhabited by people that don't want to be found.
Sure.
They want to live their life. People don't get in each other's business. So could she be out there? Yeah. I think what Jake said is probably true. I think she would not have wanted to leave her family hanging. But I don't know.
That's wild. I definitely think she genuinely suffered from these fugue states. I don't think she's faking it at all.
Especially when you hear all of them. When you just hear the first one, you're like, well,
that's weird.
Maybe that's weird. But then when you put them all together, I really think there was something in her brain that could, you know, more easily than the average person snap into these states.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. Wild case, Stephanie.
You said wild in the beginning, and it's still wild.
It's maybe even wilder.
It's
crazy. I probably said the same thing. Wow, that's crazy. That's wild. That's insane. But it really is. What a fascinating disorder. I mean,
yeah,
fascinating.
I never want to make Hannah the poster child for dissociative fugues, which is what she battled so hard against. But I think her case is an example of how extreme it can be.
Right. That's pretty extreme.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about Branch of Hope, where we can help find more missing people. So we covered Light the Way, which is a victims advocacy program for missing persons in the Logan Schindelman case that we covered at the beginning of this month. And boy, are they awesome.
Such a beautiful, beautiful mission they have. I mean, we've talked about it before. To not know where your loved one is probably the most terrifying, hopeless feeling in the world. So to have this group who comes along beside you and holds your hand and walks you through it is so incredible.
Yep. They worked on some pretty high profile cases. One I know they worked on is the Maura Murray case, which is huge. They also worked on the Gabby Petito case, and now they've partnered with the Gabby Petito Foundation to help even more families, to provide more resources. But they also work on some not so high profile cases that you may not have heard of. So they really run the gamut of who they're trying to help and what cases they take on. And they really advocate for these families. They really do. And they help them navigate the system, which is not always easy to do.
On top of all the overwhelm they're already feeling. I mean, just having somebody tell you, here, call this number would be so helpful.
Exactly. So this month, a portion of our proceed from both our Patreon and sponsors is going to go to Light the Way to, again, help some of these families find their missing loved ones. If you are a Patreon member, know that a portion of your subscription is going to Light the Way. We're going to do that on your behalf and know that it's going to a really, really good cause. We appreciate you being part of our Patreon so much. You're helping to support us as creators, and then you're also helping to support these amazing nonprofits, which makes us feel so good and should make you feel so good as well. Be sure to come back next week where I will tell you the very, very twisty, turny story of Mary Louise Day. This one will knock your socks off, guys. So make sure you come back next week. You're going to want to hear about Mary Day.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, Shiver Seekers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.